Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Growth Marketing webinar series brought to you by Growth Marketing Conference and Partners. I'm Vasil, founder at GMC. We produce marketing and in-person, virtual and in-person events, and our vision is to become the most valuable event and community for modern marketers. I'm super excited for today's presentation, Mobile User Engagement in 2021, the rise of the super user. This topic is extremely relevant today since the beginning of the lockdown. Remote working apps saw an over 1,000% increase in downloads, and 2021 was a huge year for gaming, ad tech, and fitness apps. And I'm very excited to introduce Dave Daba, who will be our moderator for today's panel. He's a Chief Marketing Officer at CleverTap. CleverTap is your complete omni-channel customer engagement and user retention platform used by some of the top brands in the world, including Disney, Domino Pizza, Sony, and many others. Dave recently joined the team as a Chief Marketing Officer, bringing a proven track record, driving rapid growth and significant brand recognition for both startups and public companies. Without further ado, Dave, I'll pass it on to you to introduce the panel. Please take it away.
Great. Thanks so much, Vasil. So we put together what I think is going to be a great webinar for everybody today that's really designed to provide you some valuable insights into mobile user adoption and engagement. Specifically on today's webinar, we are actually going to hone in on a new mobile app industry term called the super user. Now, being based here in the Silicon Valley, we're always coming up with new user terms, but this specific term, the super user, is a very interesting term that basically comes out of CRM marketing and database marketing and is now moving into the mobile marketing community. And it's an absolutely important facet of how mobile app companies are going to grow their business, specifically in 2021 and 2022. Now, we've got two absolutely fantastic industry leaders here today who are heavily involved in the growth of this industry, and specifically heavily involved in the growth of the mobile gaming industry. From Statement Games, we have Jonathan Lin, who is the company's co-founder and head of product and strategy. And from AppsFlyer, we have Brian Murphy, who's the company's head of gaming. So before we dive into the meat of today's webinar, let's get to know our guests a little bit. Brian, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and AppsFlyer?
Sure. Thanks, Dave. Thanks for the introduction, Vasil, too. Yeah, my name is Brian Murphy, and I'm head of gaming for AppsFlyer. And I lead a large team of sales, product, marketing folks in the vertical of games, primarily in North America. And we sell directly to the vertical and try to grow the business in the games category across not just the US and Canada, but across the globe. And AppsFlyer, I've been with the company for about 16 months, although I've known them since probably 2012. And AppsFlyer is an attribution platform that helps to optimize and give data to app developers and primarily gaming developers in this case to try and optimize marketing campaigns to promote ROAS and return on investment in ad spend. And we develop technology as well as data to prove out an app developer's marketing campaigns so they ensure profitability and growth of their applications.
Great. Thanks, Brian. Now let's go ahead and pass it over to Jonathan Lin, who is at Statement Games. Jonathan, one of the cooler new apps I've had a chance to play around with. Why don't you tell us about yourself and your company?
Thank you, Dave. CleverTap and AppsFlyer for having me here today. I appreciate the opportunity to come and join in the conversation. My name is Jonathan Lin. I'm the co-founder, head of product and strategy for a daily fantasy sports company called Statement Games. We're early stage. We're an omni-channel gaming platform that's free to play, front-ended by live sports events, and we're back-ended by data analytics and behavioral targeting. So we leverage a lot of the tools like AppsFlyers and CleverTaps and all the cool features and products to drive things like user engagement, retention, LTV, ROI, and all that other stuff that we'll be talking about today. So glad to be here.
Fantastic. Okay, so those are our panelists for today's big show. I think before we sort of dive into the Q&A section of this, I did want to sort of set things up for you. Now, as I was getting ready for today's webinar, I decided to actually sort of take a quick look back at the future and take a look at some of the mobile gaming predictions and stats that analysts, industries, and experts were actually predicting coming into 2020. Now, I can tell you that there wasn't a single stat or analyst that actually predicted we were going to end up in a worldwide pandemic. Anyways, to start off the year, there was an estimated 2.2 billion gamers worldwide, which is an absolutely huge number. Now, when we take a look at the United States, there's an estimated 203 million mobile user gamers in the industry, which is an absolutely huge number when you actually consider how many people actually live in North America. I mean, and the answer to that is just over 330 million. But the truly astonishing number, as I was looking back at these stats, was that coming into 2020, there was 56% of mobile gamers in the United States who play mobile games more than 10 times a week. And so what that stat actually tells us is that once a type of mobile experience is adopted by a user, they will continue to stay connected to that experience in some way. Now, you can certainly say the same thing about other industries, such as e-commerce. Obviously, I can tell you right now that my wife and kids are addicted to TikTok and are constantly trying to get their dad and husband to do funny things on TikTok. So as we started sort of getting into this year, and as COVID began to shut down countries really one by one, most of the trends that we actually witnessed in 2020 actually started to really dramatically accelerate, specifically talking about the mobile gaming space in this case. And if you sort of take a look at the overall industry as a whole, my kids are a perfect example of this. None of them had actually ever heard of Zoom before. Now they do at least 4 Zoom calls a day, and that's just for school, not to mention the Zoom parties that my teenagers are now having as well. Personally, I haven't even been to a grocery store in 6 months at this point, which is an absolutely fantastic thing if you know anything about me and my dislike of walking into a grocery store. So the whole thing has changed. I mean, literally when I'm on calls with my colleagues, and hopefully they're not actually going to watch this or hear this, I can literally sit there on my mobile device and order up a week's worth of food. The bottom line here is that COVID has done more than accelerate the growth in the mobile space. It has actually changed it forever. So when we talk about mobile games and streaming content and video conferencing appearing in more and more mobile apps today, users are certainly becoming more reliant on the use of their mobile apps, which has led to this brand new invention of this term that we're talking about today, the super user. Now, I think really the best way for us to truly understand this term and these industry trends is to actually hear from our experts. So, Jonathan, the first big question I have for you, it's absolutely obvious that the lockdown has affected customer behavior as, people were sort of forced to stay home. Sort of curious, what kind of trends are you seeing from your users since COVID started back in March?
Well, it's interesting because games is not just a gaming platform, but we're front-ended by sports, right? So we got hit in multiple ways, good and bad, right? So obviously COVID hit March, sports disappeared. I mean, literally wiped out off the face of the earth for an unknown amount of time, right? People were worried about what's going to happen to their players, what's going to happen to the season. So there was a lack of events. I mean, we were throwing up content up there that were, and sorry if you guys get offended, but we did a Nathan's hot dog eating contest in July. And that may not be a sport, although some people say it. But people flocked to it, and they said, we are dying for some content. So they enjoyed the game, and they played it, and they referred their friends and family. But as you know, in March, sports kind of disappeared. But now that sports is kind of coming back, and we have a couple of kind of leagues in play, we're seeing some really massive upside. The key to it was that we continued to send out messages, push notifications, email campaigns, and that kind of brought everyone back. They knew that sports was back, but they didn't know if Statement Games was back, right? Or if we were still continuing to do games. So a couple of interesting trends were people weren't coming to the platform a couple times a week. They were coming into the platform a couple times a day. They weren't just playing one or two games. They were playing multiple games, and our network went up, as well as private games went up. People can play public tournaments in our lobby, but they can also play private games. And they started inviting their friends and family and colleagues because they had so much more time on their hands. They were craving content, especially sports, during that time. So again, we're seeing a high penetration of usage, people staying on the site or on the apps a lot longer. We're seeing user engagement numbers go up. And then, of course, we're seeing a lot of people reacting to the push and in-app notifications, all driving retention, LTV, open rates, engagements, and things like that. So certainly we're seeing a much higher app stickiness right now, now that sports are back.
Yeah. I think one of the funniest things I saw sort of early on in from a sports perspective during this pandemic was the National Basketball Association's attempt to bring the child's game of horse to us and create a horse competition between NBA and WNBA players, utilizing video. And Zoom, from people's houses. It was absolutely fascinating. Hey, so Brian, on sort of your side of the fence, I know you work with just a ton of game publishers. What sort of changes are you seeing from those publishers from your perspective?
From at the beginning of the COVID lockdown?
Yeah.
Good question. It's interesting. Some of the data that we've publicly announced at AppsFlyer is quite relevant just with the amount of scale that we've developed over a number of years. And some interesting things is year over year from 2019 to 2020, gaming apps found an increase of installs of about 45%. So that's a pretty dramatic increase for a year. The other interesting statistic is that in-app purchase revenue rose by about 25% over the same period. So that's obviously a great statistic for an app publisher in games to kind of track and follow as an indicator of success. And I was a little shocked that I wasn't shocked by the amount of installs growth, but I was a little shocked by the IAP growth. And the interesting thing is there was an inflection point right around the time that COVID hit and the lockdown really started. And we'll say that's sometime around, February to March. I think, I don't have the exact date, but like into mid-March, the inflection point showed that there was an increase in IAP revenue and a decrease in in-app ad revenue. which is a little bit kind of, I would have thought that would have been diametrically opposite, actually. Whereby the assumption is that economically there was a recessionary period that we underwent right away, and are still ultimately still in this period. But the actual spenders of these applications have gone up in games. And then the revenue that they've earned from ads, which is generally how somebody monetizes a user that's not a spender, takes place. So we found that odd that there was an increase here in spending real dollars and a decrease in the ability to monetize through advertising. And so nobody could really draw a really great conclusion from that. But I think, qualitatively, we could assume on some level that the utility entertainment value of a gaming application became more relevant to a user potentially if they had more time on their hands, which meant instead of them going to movies or spending money on music or events, concerts, sporting events, to John's point earlier, they were spending money incrementally on gaming applications rather than doing something maybe, sort of not in the non-virtual world. And that was quite an interesting kind of result that we saw. And one I don't think we really expected, and I certainly didn't expect that, but that's definitely a change. And I think a lot of game developers are starting to evaluate, who these users truly are. And if you're looking at the indicators of which applications are growing, for Jonathan, sports is definitely growing. Social casino is growing mainly because there's a lot of users, obviously, that can't go to wide area casinos anymore. They can only really play them on mobile applications or remotely inside their homes. So now they've actually grown pretty dramatically because they can, now this is sort of offsetting what they can't spend in sort of like real gambling in the real world. A lot of this is taking place potentially in the States, but highly in Europe and even in Macau and China and places like that. But then at the same time, a lot of these users, if it relates to, say, North America and the tier 1 countries, are really focused in casually oriented applications. So now what we're seeing is a big growth of casual and explosive growth in hyper casual. And I think the growth up to this point in hyper casual has been about 250%, which is sort of unsurprising because hyper casual grows like crazy anyways. But this number was astronomically bigger than I think we would have predicted. And there's just a tremendous amount of users flocking to that particular genre, and it's growing. And we're seeing application developers not only continue to build there, but new application developers and studios grow into hyper casual because they're capturing this growth and seeing it and investing in it, which has been pretty exciting. So yeah, some really interesting data points on this one, and some that we could have predicted, and some of them that seem like, wow, we really couldn't have foreseen that happening, frankly.
Yeah, as I was doing some of my Back to the Future research, sort of coming into today's webinar, one of the sort of interesting things, that I saw. I mean, obviously, I know, my kids are using, are playing mobile games all the time. They fall into that kid category, and then I was like, there's 203 million people in the United States that are playing games. That just seems like a crazy big number. And so, when you go back and you look at the stats, I'm like, gosh, it must just be all those darn millennials are, they're playing all these games, and it's all the Gen Zers. But as it turns out, it's, my age group, which let's just say is in that Gen X category that takes you from the mid 40s into the 50s. Not going to get into the specific number here on my end. But I think, 56% of Gen Xers were actually playing mobile games on a regular basis coming into COVID. And I'm just wondering, like, what is that number going to look like when we start 2021?
I don't think it's going to change all that much. That's a tough way to. It's a tough question to answer. I mean, if you look at all the leading indicators, though, that gaming as a genre, I won't even call it, gaming as a medium is growing at really, really fast pace, and they're stretching genres. So like, to Jonathan's, his business strategy and the company that he set up and what they focus on, it's gaming, it's sports, it's fantasy. I mean, all of these, compartmentalized categories are sort of melding together under the roof of, say, gaming, I guess. And so therefore, I think a lot of consumption habits are going to become more less compartmentalized, and they're going to be all sort of in one kind of entertainment sphere. And so therefore, I think in a lot of ways, you should never view gaming as sort of as sort of a, you know, kind of its own kind of place in the world. I think that, you know, as Gen Zers and millennials play more, but to your point, Gen Xers play more, you really have to evaluate the gaming business as an entertainment medium, much like film, television, and radio have been in the music industry. The music industry is a kind of an interesting sidebar to it, because you have agents, you have producers, you have developers, you have all the people that create music. But in the same way, games have the same sort of business model. It's always been sort of looked at as, you know, not something that's in the mainstream, when in fact today it totally is. Now, if you look at companies like TikTok and Triller, and you look at Roblox, and you look at Minecraft, and you look at Fortnite, for God's sakes, that's now it's now crossing the spectrum of entertainment, where Travis Scott's on Fortnite. You know, nobody would have predicted these, you know, 5, 6, 7 years ago. But that's the way you actually have to kind of evaluate the gaming industry, that it's truly one of the pillars of the entertainment marketplace, and that consumption of gaming is just as big as any one of the more prevailing and understood mediums that are out there. It's just one of the four now.
Yeah, I am just to show you how connected to this technology I am. I sat through the Travis Scott concert on Fortnite, which was like 7.5 minutes long. And it was absolutely fantastic. And then like 3 weeks later, his new McDonald's hamburger came out, and the timing of it was almost just absolutely perfect.
Right.
So Jonathan, you know, sort of on your side of the fence, I know a lot's changed since March. Really in the last, I guess maybe 60 days, are you starting to see, a heavy dose of, an uptick in what we're really calling super users at this point?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, as Brian mentioned before, everyone's, for the most part, stuck at home, right? They're not able to go out for entertainment anymore. So when you look at games, when you look at sports, it's a massive form of entertainment. And when you mix them together, all of a sudden, you have nowhere else to go. So people are playing the games in their backyard. They're playing it while they're cooking dinner. There's not a whole lot of, you can't really go out to theaters. You can't really go out to sporting events. Arenas and stadiums are closed. So what used to be deemed as a kid's or teenager kind of space is now an everybody space. So it's crossing barriers. There's more females playing games now. I'll bet you, if we take a look at the data in a couple of weeks to 45 days, Xbox and Sony PlayStation just released their latest versions last week, right? I guarantee you that some of the numbers that we're going to see are going to be very surprising. One, because if I can't spend money on going out with my family and friends, I'm going to spend money entertaining myself at home where it's safe. So certainly you're going to see more user engagement. You're going to see more people spending more time and coming to your platform more frequently. And then for sure, I think no one likes to play alone. They're going to ask their friends and their family to come play with them. They're going to say, guys, I found this cool thing. Would really love if you played with me, or I think I can, I can get bragging rights over you. Come show me that I'm wrong. So there's a lot of behavioral things that come into play, and the tools that we use to drive that behavior, like push notifications and leaderboards and referral and competition. That's all part of the journey that we want to take our subscribers through, so that they come more than a handful of times a week, and they're coming multiple a day.
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree. Nobody wants to play these games alone at all. Everybody wants to stay connected and be connected in some way, shape, or fashion. One thing I don't want to do with my friends is shop with them online at the same time, though that is a thing and that is a trend. you know, in the mobile industry that's starting to take off. So it's really, you know, I think this pandemic has really changed a lot, but it's accelerated you know, the behavior that I think we were, you know, sort of predicting for 2 or 3 years from now is now happening today, which is just absolutely interesting. So Brian, like I couldn't wait to tell you about this. So the other day I decided to do, you know, sort of a dad thing, you know, like with your kids when you sort of you challenge them with something. And I attempted to teach a few of my my older kids what IDFA is.
Oh, yeah,
and
they probably know more than we do, to be honest with you.
You're right. Like all of us, you know, there's when that subject comes up, it's, you know, total deer in the headlights. It was no different for my 17-year-olds. I was wondering if you could sort of cover that, because I think it's a really important thing for people in the mobile app development space to understand what this is and the impact that it might have on your businesses going forward.
Yeah, well, you know, at the core, the IDFA is a user identifier that has been, you know, kind of has been a commonplace within the App Store for primarily Apple, but also Google has their own version of it in the 2 prevalent app stores, to identify who a user might be based on a specific device. And historically, and up until this point, the identifier, the IDFA in this case, as we'll signify it with Apple, has been utilized for advertising purposes to promote marketing campaigns, but to direct it to a user that's specific to that device. And it's effectively allowing people to find users and present relevant advertising to that particular person. And in some case, in many cases, this identifier has been the prevalent means to which people have actually made advertising successful. However, Apple has made some very, very public statements about the fact that identifiers work against the spirit of their privacy regulation, or privacy, I would say privacy guidelines that they've sort of instituted, you know, previously and up until this point. And now these identifiers are going to be significantly reduced by Apple's policies. And, you know, there's a couple of ways to look at it. That number one, there's a lot of good reasons for it, because we do need to protect user privacy, and it's really important. And Apple's taken a very public stance, and we all sort of applaud them for, you know, taking a stance into protecting users' security and privacy, and letting them, you know, take part of the mobile ecosystem without compromising their own personal information. I think everybody can agree that's a good thing. However, it is going to present a lot of challenges for the marketing industry in regards to mobile that have historically utilized these identifiers to do this advertising and do it successfully. And a lot of ad networks that are out there, like the big self-reporting networks that we're all familiar with, like Facebook and Google, and the other ad networks that sort of surround it that have been really successful, have leveraged these to make advertising worthwhile to the user, to actually promote good user experience, and to help applications grow successfully and profitably. And the whole industry is actually having to re-architect and re-envision how they will do this with these identifiers potentially going away completely. And it's going to make a lot of changes. It's going to be a lot of challenging changes, but ultimately it's going to spur a lot of great innovation that's probably necessary in the market. And a lot of the companies around the ecosystem in regards to marketing and games are going to have to confront this and work together to actually to get through this period, which will be a challenge. But that's effectively what this IDFA means. And it's going to, you know, make it very challenging for companies to market their applications in the way they've done it in the past, once these regulations sort of go through and this is the new norm for the marketplace.
Yeah. Jonathan, how do you think this is going to affect your business?
It's going to impact it, honestly, for good and for bad. I mean, listen, I think it's a great question, and it's one that a lot of developers, big or small, are going to have to tackle and think really hard about this from a holistic and strategic viewpoint, right? I mean, user privacy is obviously very sacred. It's important. We want to protect it, but and especially in the world things like GDPR and IDFA continue to give the subscribers a little bit more control over their privacy, whether they want to opt in or opt out or double opt in or things like that, right? But I think that users are willing to give up a little bit of their privacy if they're getting something back in return, whether it's relevant advertising, whether it's good offers and promotions. What they don't want to see is, I give you access to my data, but then you use that or sell it, or, you know, you lose control of that data, where it's housed, who gets access to it, you're hacked, those types of things. I think that it's good for the ecosystem, but certainly guys like Twitter, Facebook, Amazon, Google, they're all going up, you know, in front of the Senate these days, and they're justifying, hey, you guys love what we're doing. We're building technology that's relevant for everybody, and it's driving Wall Street, but you guys don't like the fact that we're making money off of it as well. So I think it's going to be a very interesting conversation to see what happens. I think that people who are trying to regulate it may not fully understand it, but I do think that there are things that we can do to protect privacy, but at the same time still evolve the ecosystem so that, you know, guys like Facebook, Amazon, Google, and small guys like us will be able to continue to leverage data to hyper-target or behavioral target our subscribers with things that make sense for them and that's relevant for them, right? So if you have my data, but you are constantly sending me content that doesn't make any sense for me, then I'm not going to be happy with you having access to my data. But if you have access to my data and it allows me to not have to pay a subscription, or it allows me to some ads to play your game for free, hey, you find some really cool deals from me because you are looking at my file. And I think that's what people are okay with. Okay with the data that we collect on them.
Yeah, that's really really interesting. I did want to just bring this up to everybody out there. If you have any questions, please go ahead and hit the ask a question button and go ahead and drop your questions in. I know we've got looks like almost a couple handful of questions so far. We'll try to get to those during the session. What we don't get to, you know, the three of us will certainly answer those questions and get back to you offline. Brian, we sort of talked about this just a little bit earlier, which is, you know, comparing sort of mobile gaming to the music industry and where the where sort of the you know, music industry is today. You know, when we sort of look at this, you know, in the box offices and, you know, the ability to stream movies at home in real time, I was able to relive my childhood with a brand new Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure premiere. You know, didn't have to go to the movie theater and put on a mask to do it. You know, where do you see this going, you know, in like 2 or 3 years?
Where gaming is going to go in 2 to 3 years?
Yeah, sort of compared to the growth of the music industry. Do you think it's going to, you know, sort of an interesting question. Do you think it's going to grow at a faster pace than the music industry over the next 2 to 3 years?
I absolutely feel like that's definitely the case. You know, I don't want to get too off topic, but the music industry is changing dramatically too. I mean, like, you know, this is an example here, and again, I don't want to deviate, but if you think about how music now is consumed over YouTube and Triller and all these other mechanisms that are out there, TikTok, Snapchat, you know, those are new platforms, frankly, to distribute music for independent artists. So I think like that, the way that some of those, you know, the way the music industry consumes content is changed quite a bit. There's a really interesting mobile game that's out there in the market, which a lot of people, you know, in this sphere are aware of, which is called Among Us. It's by a company called Innersloth that's in the Pacific Northwest of the States. And Among Us has grown unbelievably organically. And some of the growth that's been quite interesting from what we gather has really been post-COVID, where from what I understand, and mind you, I'm not of this age anymore, but there's a lot of, you know, children that are out of school right now. And the way that they're communicating now is playing Among Us between their friends. and they're doing it virtually within their own homes. But this, and I'm using this as an example of this is how consumption habits and, basically socialization has changed since we've had all this disruption, over the past year. And although, look, there will be some normalcy that's going to come back, naturally. I don't think the consumption is going to change completely from where we're at today till 6 months from now. I think that some of these habits, some of our engagements as human beings with our friends, with our social graphs, you want to call them, is going to remain the same, and we're just going to deal with it, and that's just going to be a new venture in the world that we're going to confront, and kind of that's the new normal we're all going to deal with. I'm not suggesting on any level that it's going to be completely the way it is today, but I can't imagine that there aren't going to be residual impacts of how we socialize together 6 months from now, when hopefully there's a vaccine around and people are sort of going back to some levels of normalcy in terms of school and work, etc. But it's interesting if you kind of take that paradigm or that baseline, and you're assuming from a foundational perspective that that will remain, and apps like Among Us are going to grow, because not only is it a good application, but at the same time, it's allowing children in this case to socialize and communicate in a different medium. Then I can't imagine that apps like Among Us aren't going to grow in different ways into the future, because the consumption habits are not going to change all that dramatically. And so I think, if you look at games and and the question is it going to continue to grow to the same level of that it has up until this point? I would say absolutely. I just don't see how games aren't going to be a medium at the end of the day, and also a communication platform the way that it is now, and it won't continue to grow in that direction. When you look at companies like Discord and others that have built their entire platforms around communicating around this one medium.
Yeah, I think what sort of happens is there's a convergence of tools and convergence of features that occur in some of these casual games and these mobile games, where the communication component of it is part of the game itself. The bringing specific music into the game. In other parts of the world, we don't really have this here in the U.S. at this point, but there are super apps, and those super apps have the ability to to request a car, get your groceries delivered, get your food, have your dry cleaning picked up, all sorts of different services, all from a single app. I think when we sort of look at some of these gaming companies and other companies as well, convergence of tools into those apps is turning these some of these gaming apps, as well as general sort of communication apps, into almost super apps. One of my favorite things to do pre-COVID was to embarrass my daughter by calling her when I knew she was with her friends on Snapchat. I could have FaceTimed with her, but I'd actually give her a call on Snapchat, and she'd have to say to her friends, "My dad is calling me on Snapchat." Anyways, with that being said, Jonathan, let's talk about retention a little bit on your side of the fence. Give us a sort of a perspective on how retention's going for you, and maybe some of the things you're doing to create more sort of super users in your community.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think retention is probably one of the most important things that you can focus on when you develop a digital marketing architecture, right? You want to have a conversation with your users, getting them into the top of the funnel and onto your platform as a registered subscriber is the first step. Keeping them interested in what you're doing, getting them to engage with your product and your services, getting them to open up your messages. That's all part of the journey you need to be right at if you want to retain them and keep them on your platform, right? I think some of the stats that I've seen, and I've been in mobile for over 2 decades now. So, when you take a look at retention, it's like, I think you have somewhere between 24 and 48 hours before that person who downloads your app decides whether they're going to keep it on their phone or not. And they have, on average, I believe the latest stat was somewhere between 90 to 110 apps on their phone. So it's real estate that they can either decide if they want to keep on their phone within 24 or 48 hours. You better send them a welcome message. You better tell them, hey, we got these upcoming events. These are some of the cool features. Here's how to use the product. Go invite some friends. These are all things that you want to do in order to engage with them and build a relationship with them. If you don't chat with them, if you don't respond in social, if you don't answer their questions, or they had a problem or they found a bug, and you don't respond to them, they're gone. Before you can even know that they're gone. So I think retention is absolutely key. You know, we have some really interesting things that have happened even during COVID. People have been so engaged with us because we're using some of these tools that they're now asking for certain features in our app. They're giving us product ideas. They're DMing us. They're reposting our games in social. They're becoming ambassadors and advocates. And pushing people to come, one, because we reward them for it, because rightfully they should be. They're becoming kind of influencers of our platform. But two, if these super users are telling you a message and saying, hey, guys, you're missing the boat on something, or something's broken, these are the guys that you want to listen to, and these are the guys that you want to keep happy, because they're going to eventually grow your platform organically without you necessarily having to pay for it.
Yeah. I think that is, you know, absolutely accurate. You know, one of the things about super users is it's essentially really, and I've been doing this for 20 plus years now. It's essentially database marketing in real time, and so what that really means is you've got your list of known super users that you can see, and then it turns into, if you will, sort of a game within a game. Which is you've got your casual users, you've got your people who you know, only showed up once, and the question is, you know, how do you move along, you know, casual users into super users? And so the first thing, and you know, that I just want to say about that is it's just the answers are in the data. So you have to you know, sort of understand the data. And you know, there's a lot of companies out there that you know, can sort of help do this for you in real time, which is really sort of the advantage of database marketing in sort of this mobile environment. You can use the technology to create new super users as you go, which I think is a huge thing. Brian, I've got a question for you from the audience. Are you ready?
Sure.
Okay. So which categories are acing the game in terms of user retention in 2020? And are they expected to grow more faster in the coming 5 years?
Good question. I think there's a few genres that have really succeeded, I think, just recently, since this all started. And I'm going to go back and say hyper casual is definitely retaining users and doing a much better job at it. Casual. But the ones that are really, really doing well is social casino. They've really mastered who their best users are, and are using tools like a Clever Tap or other engagement tools, and frankly, retargeting advertising in a really, really meaningful way to bring back the valuable users. So retention for them, to me, has done very, very well. I would say that the hardcore business, I don't see as much success there. I'm not saying they're unsuccessful, but we are seeing some of the methodologies from some of the more casual-oriented titles really succeed in retaining its users more aggressively and more successfully. So I think those genres have done a great job of that, and that's really kind of understanding your users and having the right tool sets in place to re-engage with them from a retention management perspective. So I'm really kind of like seeing those as being the true successes and where the growth is for retaining users to high levels of success.
Yeah. Jonathan, any quick opinions on this one?
I mean, I think the gaming vertical as well as the sports vertical has really been at the forefront of using data for a long time. We're starting to see a lot of tech come out, and if you look at some of the deal flows that VCs are investing in, and even traditional data companies are investing in, I think we're doing a great job of paving the way of data science, analytics, and digital marketing and attribution and things like that, right? I think you're going to see some different verticals start learning, and you're starting to see it right now, whether it's health tech, ed tech, that are and retail brands that maybe can't open their doors right now or can only do 25% capacity. They need to reach their subscribers somehow. They need to get them to purchase somehow. So they're using the same tools. They're using the same strategies. Maybe it's a different message. But certainly, I think sports and gaming has used retention and a lot of the tools that we're talking about today, whether it's CleverTap, AppsFlyer, and some of these other digital marketing tools, email, etc., to really drive that discussion and keep at the forefront of the relationship that they have with their users. Out of sight, out of mind. So if I don't get a push notification from an app, I'm just going to stumble upon it maybe a week later, a month later. But if I'm getting, hey, look at this deal, or hey, you're nearby a restaurant that you went to 2 months ago, I think those things are relevant and are going to drive behavior, COVID or not. I think people are getting used to getting information to drive them back into apps, as well as keep the relationships that they have with the brands that they touch.
Yeah, I could literally spend take 3 or 4 hours and update my apps. I have that many apps on my mobile device at this point, and it's crazy. I thank God there's a search function. I can't find anything, and you put stuff in categories and all this stuff, but it doesn't matter. Hey, Brian, I think we're getting sort of close to the end of our webinar here. I think we're going to run over just a little bit, but lots of questions around fintech and ed tech, and I know a lot of our expertise on this panel are really around gaming, but AppsFlyer covers a swath of it all. What are sort of your thoughts on both ed tech and fintech?
It's that we're seeing a lot of growth for both. I mean, that's like not even, I mean, I'm barely even like, that's just, I'm understating a lot there. Fintech applications are exploding. Yeah. I mean, and there's fintech apps I would have never even pictured that are hitting the marketplace beyond the ones we're familiar with, like, Coinbase and Robinhood and whatnot. I mean, there's Chime is growing like crazy. And I mean, we're seeing tremendous growth there. The interesting thing is it's sort of also taking into account like how the younger users that are out there, how they value financial services, and just look at it totally differently than the three of us kind of evaluated what a bank account truly is, and how do you invest appropriately? Like, it's just the behavior of them is just so much different. But it's led to this explosive growth of a new industry, and it's really turning financial services on its head. It's interesting. I'll say one thing that, and I hope I don't prolong this conversation, but one thing about fintech, which is quite interesting, and I think Jonathan might agree with me here, is that the gaming business actually grew from financial services. And the reason being in San Francisco, primarily in San Francisco, but I would say that this also was sort of relevant in New York, but primarily in the Bay Area and San Francisco specifically, is a lot of the game developers that we're familiar with today that have been really successful, like Pocket Gems and Glue and Jam City, etc. A lot of those marketing analysts, the people that drove the marketing sophistication and the growth of this real data science behind it, all came from the financial services industry, where they were at Bear Stearns and they were at Morgan Stanley and any kind of hedge fund or financial services organization, from years in the past. And they were all obviously highly adept at data science and how they utilize financial models to come out with profitability. And when they got tired of the financial services industry, gaming actually ended up becoming a good fit for them, once they left the financial career. And then they ended up applying some of these methodologies that they utilized to create these really sophisticated models to prove profitable growth from a marketing perspective for these products that hit the consumer marketplace? Well, in a 360-degree fashion, once those people left the gaming industry, a lot of them ended up going to Coinbase, Robinhood, and all the companies we're talking about today. So they've come full circle where now all of these financial services, marketing folks that are driving the growth of this fintech industry are actually coming from the financial industry 10 to 15 years ago, applied it in gaming, and now it's sort of gamified fintech in some way or another. So quite an interesting kind of like, sidebar to that or a qualitative story. But yeah, fintech is growing like crazy. Edutech edtech is a little bit different in that there's a lot of challenges, obviously, with the app stores and in user privacy in regards to younger users. So, as Apple has changed its policies, adjusted its policies, and I'm sure Google will do the same, that throws a very challenging kind of, I want to say block to the industry, but consideration. And it also, what it has done in some cases is turned the mobile marketplace backwards, where you're almost going back a few years now, where a lot of the user journey sort of needs to begin on the web to some degree before it actually gets to mobile. And the ways that, we've attracted mobile users in advertising previously doesn't apply itself to maybe an industry that's, has its own hesitations about user privacy and the youth of its base. And we all have to take, that into major consideration. It's like, is this, is the edutech business actually more applicable to the web at this stage than maybe mobile? And we're all sort of trying to figure that out. And it's creating a lot of, some confusion to some degree, and also just, again, spurring more innovation about how we, attract users, but doing it the right way with new regulations and new considerations into the future.
Yeah, I know that when. So one of my sons is going to turn 18 coming up in about a week, and by the way, still bought a PS5. So right. That's going to carry on, I think, for at least.
Wait till PS6,
Yeah, PS6 exactly.
Was that for you or for your son? Was that for you?
And I've got a picture of him hugging the box and all that. But like if Robinhood existed when I was 18. I would have, the second I turned 18, it would have been an app I downloaded and started to use. Knowing my kid the way I do, I know that's exactly what's gonna happen with him. It's like the apps, have definitely changed the way the world is working. Jonathan, any final last minute words before we wrap up today's webinar?
Yeah, I mean, listen, whether it's sports or gaming, when you take a look at some of the companies that have been around for 10, 20 years, and you look at who survived and who's not, right? I mean, Netflix was begging Blockbuster to fund them or to acquire them. And because they put all their cards in digital and they did digital marketing and had these digital conversations with their users, they're now one of the most largest companies building massive profits, and they survived. If you take a look at Disney, Zynga, EA, some of these guys who are just using gamification and digital tools to have conversations and build relationships with their subscribers, those are the guys who continue to grow, and those are the guys who continue to retain their subscribers at a very, very loyal environment, right? So I think that, it's great for mobile. In my world, every year was the year of mobile. Mobile is here to stay. There's going to be a lot of evolution and changes along the way, including impacted by COVID, ed tech, health tech, how we do business, how we interact with our subscribers. All of that is going to change or evolve in some way, shape, or form. And the ones who really invest in these types of tools and bridge partners with the Clever Taps and the AppsFlyers of the world, I think are going to be the ones who really continue to catapult and reinvent and re-involve. So innovation is going to be amazing for the next couple of years and years to come.
Fantastic. Brian, any last couple words? I hear a baby crying. I just want you to know it's not mine.
I think at the end of the day, gaming is going to grow dramatically. It's made for mobile now. there's going to be a lot of interesting kind of changes that are going to come to the market, you know, with what we talked about earlier. But you know, I think that it's a way that people are going to, again, communicate and socialize together in ways we wouldn't have envisioned a decade ago. And they're really smart investments because I think, Dave, you kind of suggested like, well, where could this go? And if you look at Facebook and Snapchat, you know, all the areas that they could actually build a larger business from. I think gaming is an interesting is an interesting location too, because the consumption periods can be so long and meaningful to somebody that they're spending so much time on it. Why couldn't they be payment platforms? You know, why couldn't they be distribution tools? Why couldn't they be, you know, why couldn't they be places where movies are given trailers? You know, there's a lot more that can be done in games because there's so many hooks, to Jonathan's point about how to socialize with people. And gaming has really been at the forefront of creating this engagement and K factor that we're all familiar with and utilize as like a strategy to grow applications, you know, either from the first instant to, you know, growth down the line. That like there's just so many different lines of business that can be aligned to it and grow and see just, you know, tremendous amounts of unseen sort of like innovation that we've never experienced before, that you know, it's going to continue to grow and it's going to get more broad. And as we see companies like Line and WeChat sort of completely broaden what they're doing, they become something beyond what we could have imagined or envisioned earlier. And that's just something to consider, that, you know, games, that's just the tip of the iceberg. That's the jumping off point. There's, you know, it can go in any other direction there, provided you have the users and they're engaged and they like your product.
Yeah. Well, listen, guys, I've personally really enjoyed today's webinar. I think we could have easily done another hour. We could have done the world's first 2-hour webinar without a break, I think, for sure, because there's just so much to cover in this topic, you know, sort of around, you know, what a super user is, how that super user is sort of evolving and changing. And also, you know, really, I think, you know, the answers always lie in the data, and your data from your mobile app performance, you know, usually sort of tells you where you can go, and will also help you figure out how to create what we all really want, which is more super users. Anyways, I want to thank everybody out there for watching today's webinar. The team over here at CleverTap is certainly going to be producing more webinars in the future, so stay tuned to our channels for that. For Jonathan Lin of Statement Games, Brian Murphy of AppsFlyer, I'm Dave Dubois at CleverTap, wishing you all a tremendous rest of your week.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks,
Appreciate
guys.
it.